All right, it's talk time now. President Muhammadu Buhari may continue with his fight against corruption this year after he successfully launched his zero tolerance to graft war in 2015.
Many Nigerians have continued to criticize his government's ability to successfully prosecute corrupt persons without bias. But the government insists the fight has just begun. Now let's listen to this.
The truth, of course, is that without controlling corruption, there is absolutely no way that our economy or our nation will survive. There are some people who have been suggesting that perhaps we should slow down on corruption, slow down on this fight against corruption, as if government sits down and talks every day about corruption. That's not what happens. We don't hold meetings about corruption. We have decided there's a policy on corruption. We have empowered the appropriate agencies, the EFCC, the ICPC. We have empowered them. We don't control them in any way. They simply go out and do their work based on information that's available to them.
Corruption is a major obstacle. But beyond fighting corruption, we should also ask ourselves, what really are the fundamental causes of corruption? And I think the government should engage social scientists to look at, is there a fundamental sociological problem why people are corrupt? Is it a problem of the Nigerian state? That people see the Nigerian state as alien from themselves?
It is one and the same thing. As you reduce impunity, lawlessness, and corruption, you gain by people being able to come in, invest, increase productivity, grow the economy, and create jobs.
Corruption is a continuous thing. You see, it's never really eliminated in any society. Even most advanced countries in the world, they still have to deal with issues of corruption. How much more are at the level that our country has sunk to today in terms of the kind of things that are being reviewed every day. So I think it's the beginning and the end. Sincerely speaking, I do not see how we can get out of these economic problems without people being made to pay for the crimes against the state.
Oh, it's amazing. One of the, the people we spoke with there just put it succinctly. What is the root cause of corruption? Have we really been able to tackle corruption at the root, or are we just, dealing with the symptoms and leaving the main cause of the disease? Well, with us in the studio is a lawyer, Bartholomew Agoebodo, and joining us from Abuja studio is a senior advocate of Nigeria, Jibrin Okutepa. Good morning to you, gentlemen, and a happy new year. Let's begin with you right here in the studio. You heard the respondents there give their different views about this war against corruption. But let me just quote what President Buhari said in his New Year speech. He said, government is determined to wrestle corruption to the ground. Now, looking back at the last 20 months or so, how would you assess this anti-corruption war?
Well, without wasting much time, my assessment of the anti-corruption war of the present administration will be based on the sincerity of purpose. One, you cannot be talking about fighting corruption where you are involved or you get policies that seems to suggest to the populace that you are not actually sincere in the fight against corruption. One of the commentators just made a comment that is very, very sensitive when he said that when people feel alienated from the leadership, they seem not to have any commitment to nationhood. And that is the beginning and the end of corruption. Now, until we find ourselves in a situation where we see the government being really sincere about giving everybody a sense of belonging, the fight of corruption will be a noble. Where am I going with this? Look at it from this point of view. The president is talking about fighting corruption to a 0 point. We'll have an allegation against the SSG right in his backyard. We have a situation where the Customs Act was violated in the appointment of the Controller General. We have appointments done without regards to law, which gives an ordinary citizen the impression that even the man at the helm of affairs is having some form of favoritism in appointment. It becomes difficult to tell the layman on the street that no, we are fighting corruption. I was listening to the last program you had from the Niger Delta thing when they said Until you give somebody a sense of belonging, he believes in what you are doing, you may not be able to get people to back it. So my assessment without more is that the fight against corruption, the president is doing his bit from the way he sees it. But corruption is not limited to only those who took our national wealth. I have said in other programs where I appeared and I said, until we find ourselves in a situation where I don't see political appointment as an avenue to enrich myself, our fight against corruption will be a lip service.
Okay. Well, let's get to Jibrin Okutepa in Abuja. Now, Jibrin, let me come this way. When it comes to the root, the source, the reason why there is corruption in the first place, now how, if we look at the Nigerian situation, Nigerian society, Nigerian polity or Nigerian economy, as the case may be, the way we live, what we have and what we do not have, how does it fuel corruption, or how does it, or otherwise of it?
Well, I wasn't hearing my colleague very well, but let me say that from the society we come from, Nigerian society, until of late, corruption was not as pronounced as we have now. There were values in our villages, in various cultures, in various backgrounds. There were values. People respect the value, the culture of the people who were not thieves, who were not robbers, who were not rogues, who were not assassinating ourselves. But suddenly we began to nosedive into culture and began to assimilate them as if they are our culture. And so no more teaching of moral to our children. We allow our children to watch other people's culture, copy it blindly, and things began to deteriorate in geometrical proportion. Then there was no, so very shortly, if you recall, in those days, even in primary schools, you do what you call craft, handwork, where you bring something for people to give you mark for the beauty of the craft you have done. Suddenly, we began to replace that with money. And so, there was no reward system for hard work, for industry, for competence, and for honesty. And if you watch now well, people respect people who demonstrate affluence by the number of cars they have, the number of houses they have, the number of money they can throw even at weddings. And even government, the way we play politics in this country, also encourage corruption. If you look at a lot of money that are said to have been embezzled and siphoned, they were all done in the name of politics. To the extent that even money meant to pay pension and gratuity of those who have labored in this country were siphoned and taken away in the name of acquiring political offices. And so people now began to say, okay, since there is no reward system for hard work, no reward system for industry, no reward system for integrity, let me also steal, so that at the end of the day, even if my pension and gratuities are not paid, then I'll have something to fall back. So people began to steal not only for themselves, they began to steal for their children, their grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, to the detriment of the vast majority of our people. And so the root cause of corruption, therefore, is that we derailed our moral background, we left it and began to acquire stupendous wealth to the detriment and against the interests of our brothers and sisters. Otherwise, in those days, if you are a thief, you are ostracized, you are sent away from the village.
All right, and that's where I would actually want to...
Every child in the village.
That's where I would want to bring it back to Bartholomew Agbodo. He said something there that we didn't used to steal, we had morals and all of those things, but he just said something about what happens to a person who stole in those days. They were punished, they were ostracized, they were shamed, they were named and shamed. Is that what is missing in this present day war against corruption in the different ways it actually shows up?
Let me put it this very way. The criminal administration system at the time my learned Sikh was talking about is very different than what we have today. In the time he was talking about, it's a communal system where the standard required of proof does not require your calling witnesses. You don't need a lawyer. The fact is presented. The community sees the facts for what it is, and the sanction is given. The sanction is already known. We live in a complex world today where just saying a man is a thief and bringing one person to testify, yes, this man is a thief, and the man has no defense, doesn't work any longer. There is an elaborate criminal administration of justice system which says this man is entitled to a defense. Now, what we have is where the punishment system is no longer deterrent, as in the period he was talking about, corruption is entrenched. Because if I know that I could move ₦1 billion from my office, and even if I am where I am caught, it will take 2-3 years for the prosecution to be able to do anything. And even if I am convicted, I still have an open room for appeal. We have cases of governors in 1999 who were accused of massive corruption. Until date, not a single of those cases was concluded.
That's all right. We have to go on a break now, and then we come back to the point you're making. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast. We'll go on a break, and we come back on the program. Stay with us. Right, if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast, and on this segment we're talking about the war against corruption, and we're looking at 2016, how things have been, and going into 2017, how things are likely to be. Those are the things we're talking about. And we have in the studio a lawyer, Bartholomew Agu Egbodo, with us in here, and we have joining us from Abuja, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Jibrin Okutepa. Now, I'll take you to my wall shortly, but President Muhammadu Buhari is nationally and internationally acclaimed for his disdain for corruption. And let's take you down memory lane. Let me take you to my wall, and then we have a better understanding of this. It's good to see all these coins, right? Okay, now, during his first stint as Nigeria's #1 citizen between 1983 and 1985, Buhari inherited, went on exile. Now, he tried to bring back sanity to governance by ensuring that government officials indicted for corruption were prosecuted and severely punished. Let's get in further. Now, tackling corruption was one of Buhari's campaign promises, and since he won the 2015 election and assumed office, President Buhari has not wavered in his resolve to nip corruption in the bud. The way he's going about it is one thing Nigerians are saying, okay, why is it like this? Why is it not like that? Now, a lot of people seeing things from different window, which is a part of the system. Now, the president was quick to set up a committee to that effect, headed by Professor Ise Sage, and since then, in conjunction with Nigeria's anti-corruption agencies, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the ICPC, this administration declared war on corruption. Now let's review some of the corruption cases pursued by the EFCC that shook the nation in 2016. Let's get on now. Few months after President Buhari assumed office in May 2015, the news of misappropriation of a whopping sum of $2.1 billion meant for the purchase of arms very much needed by the Nigerian army in the fight against insurgency broke. And the money was allegedly disbursed for other purposes by the Office of the National Security Advisor, Sambo Dasuki. Now, this is arguably one of the biggest corruption cases that rocked Nigeria, as the hashtag arms deal scandal quickly flooded the social media, and the EFCC swiftly swung into action, arrested the former National Security Advisor, Sambo Dasuki, and placed him on detention. Investigations by the anti-corruption agency allegedly revealed that Dasuki didn't act alone. He allegedly indicted other top politicians, elder statesmen, and notable personalities. Now let's get on. Now, Chief Raymond Dokpesi was one of those indicted. The national spokesman or spokesperson of the People's Democratic Party, Olisa Metu, was also indicted. Elder statesman and former chairman of the Board of Trustees of the People's Democratic Party, Chief Tony Aneni, former military governor of Kaduna State, Jafar Issa, the former governor of Sokoto State, Atahiru Bafarawa, were all indicted by the EFCC for receiving more than 100 million naira each from the largest. There were other people who were also indicted who got different sums of money. Let's get on. Now, and just when many Nigerians thought the hashtag arms deal scandal couldn't get any messier, the names of top-ranking military officers began to pop up on the list of persons being investigated by the EFCC. Now, former Chief of Defense Staff, retired Air Chief Marshal Alex Bade, was one of those, and two former Chiefs of Air Staff, retired Air Marshal Adeshola Amosun, is also reported to be there. His name also came up, and retired Air Marshal MD Umar is another person. Some of those that were investigated by the EFCC. Let's move on now to another corruption saga that generated media attention in 2016. Now, the term and idea of budget padding has been in existence for a while, but 2016 was the year it officially became part of the media lexicon. Let me say media lexicon, after President Buhari presented an appropriation bill of 6.08 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly for consideration and passage. Now, different controversies began to unfold as initially, a few days after the 2016 budget presentation, the document was allegedly declared missing. This caused a stir as different reports began to emanate from Nigeria's legislative chambers until Speaker of the House of Reps, Yakubu Dogara, laid everyone's fears to rest when he assured Nigerians that the document was safely locked up and in the custody of the clerk of the National Assembly. Now,
you know what, Mike?
Yes.
Let me just jump in here. Now, with the list of people that you have, reeled out in this anti-corruption war of President Muhammadu Buhari, let me just ask Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Jibrin Okutepa, very quickly. Now, looking at this list, would you be on the same page with the people who say that this anti-corruption war has largely been a one-sided war?
Well, I am not on the same page with anybody who says anti-corruption war is one-sided. The reason being that none of the people who are saying that the anti-corruption war is one-sided had come out to say that the people accused didn't do what they say to have done. So, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who is accused of corruption must face the music. And I mark you that some of these corruption cases have put us in the current economic reception. Because if the money we had were judiciously used, if our roads were tarred, if hospitals were constructed, if universities were well funded, and so on and so forth, I'm not too sure that we'll face what we're facing now. So, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who is accused of corruption must face the music. My only appeal to government is that they must fight this corruption with a commitment that shows openness, transparency, and accountability. There is no need to fight corruption when indeed those who are fighting corruption have also lost the moral credential to fight corruption. Therefore, those fighting corruption or those prosecuting corrupt cases must not engage in corruption, because it is bad to rob Peter to pay Paul. It is bad to collect corrupt money from these other persons, and it ends up in another person's pocket.
All right. So, Agwebodo, would you then say that? Would you then, agree with President when he says that the war will be fought and guided by respect for the rule of law? Has that been the case so far till date?
My answer will be emphatic no. You cannot talk about fighting corruption with respect of rule of law where there are court orders not being obeyed. Obedience to court order is one of the foundations of rule of law. The respect of orders made by court of competent jurisdiction. You must keep to procedures. The Criminal Administration of Justice Act made it very, very clear you cannot arrest somebody without arraignment in court when there is a court within 30 kilometer radius for 2 days without arraigning him. And the system of our fighting corruption here is a bit worrisome. In advanced crimes, you don't bring a man in for a case of corruption without first of all gathering enough evidence against him. That limits the time of his detention. In Nigeria, you are arrested first, and they start what I call evidence shopping. So if you are saying the fight against corruption must be done within the ambit of the rule of law, you go back and look at the procedures for fighting corruption. I mentioned it earlier when I said that the administration of criminal justice in the earlier time, which is based on our customs and norms, are very, very different with the procedures today. And you cannot claim to fight corruption within the ambit of the rule of law where those orders made. You just talked about Dasuki there. There has been series of orders made about Dasuki's matter. If you are talking about adherence to the rule of law, why talk about a closed session in trial? One of the cardinals of rule of law, the trial must be done in open court. So until I see it that government has nothing in itself to hide, that the government isn't protecting anybody in the fight against corruption, the general opinion will be that the fight of corruption is selective, based on those who do not form part of the government or who have divergent views as to what the government is doing.
All right, let me ask the senior advocate on this. Now, our legal system, the way where Agwegbodo in the studio earlier talked about how cumbersome the law could be sometimes, where you can there are appeals, there are issues of injunctions, there are issues of continuous defense and counter defense and all of that. Do you think that the system that we run is so cumbersome that it becomes even difficult to fight corruption within the courts as it is?
Yes, I agree. If you recall in the beginning, I said that we had value. Now, I see most of our laws as being copied from advanced countries of the world without taking the peculiar circumstances of our nation into account. For instance, my learned friend there spoke about the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. Now, if you situate the Administration of Criminal Justice Act very well within the context of Nigerian Constitution, you will discover that the Administration of Criminal Justice Act had allowed the law enforcement agents to get order to remind people without even trial. That itself, to me, is bad, because our law enforcement agent, and like my learned friend there rightly pointed out, engage in what I may refer to as investigation shopping. They don't even have concrete evidence. Detention, extract something from you, that itself is wrong.
Okay, all right, Jibrin.
Within
yes, Jibrin, there are some distortions between, so we can't hear you clearly, but we'll have to fine tune that. Stay with us on the program. We'll go on a break and we'll come back on this. Stay with us.
Right, you're welcome back. You're watching TVC Breakfast, and we're looking at how the anti-corruption war has fared so far, especially in 2016, and we're looking forward. Our guest in the studios, of course, Bartholomew Agwegbodo is here, and Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Jibrin Okutepa, is in our Abuja studio, both men legal practitioners.
Now,
Mike,
I was still on my wall. I'm still being on my wall. We were talking about the budget padding issue that has become a lexicon in our media or political spheres, as the case may be. Now, eventually, after much back and forth between the legislature and the presidency, all hell broke loose when former chairman of the House of Reps Appropriation Committee, Abdulmumin Jibril, outrightly accused the principal leaders of the House of Reps of padding the 2016 budget. And Nigerians began to see new things in new ways, how these things are done. Let's move on. Now, this revelation by Jibrin, though was done after, according to him, he was unlawfully and maliciously removed as the chairman of the said committee by Speaker Yakubu Dogara, his deputy Yusuf Lasun, Chief Whip Ado Dogora and Dogoa rather, and Minority Leader Leo Ogo. The situation quickly degenerated as accusations and counter-accusations of budget padding quickly became the order of the day, and the hashtag budget padding began trending on social media. Now, Jibrin accused Dogara and the others of attempting to pad 30 billion naira into the 2016 budget, as well as plans to allocate to themselves 40 billion naira out of the 100 billion naira allocated to the entire National Assembly. And he further went to disclose that the principal officers of the House of Reps allocated over 20 billion naira to their constituencies for wasteful projects. Those were revelations by Abdulmumin Jibrin that he has been on suspension since after that time. And let's go on. Now, more recently was the arrest of prominent judges after their houses were raided at night by the Department of State Services. And 7 judges suspected of corrupt practices were taken into custody by the DSS, and that's to facilitate investigations. And after much back and forth between the NJC and the DSS on the legality of the judges' arrest, the NJC, that's the National Judicial Council, suspended the indicted judges. Now, the 7 judges in the eye of the storm are Sylvester Ngota and Inyang Okoro, both of the Supreme Court, Justice Kabiru Auta of Kano High Court, Justice Adini Ademola of the Federal High Court, Abuja, Justice I.A. Umezulike, and former Chief Judge of Enugu State, Muazu Pindiga of Federal High Court, Gombe Division, and Mohammed Samia, Justice of the Court of Appeal, Ilorin Division. Now, let me come to you on this, Bath. Jibrin earlier was talking about if there's so much money for education, there's money for health, there's money for roads, there's money for all of this, we may not be having this kind of system in the first place. Now, going back to the times where politics maybe goes on, sometimes chief executive, politicians, they travel with so much money in their boots, in their cars, in their pockets, and so on. Those kind of monies, if they were actually allocated to all the different agencies of government, do you think things can be really different?
It will be difficult to conclude that things will be different if those allocations were done to different projects.
Okay.
Because one, corruption does not just start and end with one spot.
All right.
If the man who is the chief executive of all those money decides to distribute it to major projects around him, what happened to those who receive? The plank of it is simple. Once the norms of a community has been altered in a way that we don't have that sense of belonging. At the time he was talking about, my learned Sik was talking about, politicians had this nationalistic outlook. The Awolowas of their time, the Zik of their time, the Sadwana of their time were preoccupied, even if there was corruption at that time, with what will my people remember me for? So they were all battling to build a legacy in the eyes of their people at that time. Now, if that money goes down from the man at the head for projects, those who have the projects have the mission statement that that thing must be done. Even if there was corruption at that level, it was limited. But what we have today is that the man at the head who is even releasing the money, he's giving the money down there, knows certainly that he is eating up there.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset that I have been given 100 million naira for my community development project. The man gets down, keeps 80 million and releases 20 million. I have it that if I am caught as a thief, 20 million was not released for this project. 100 million was released for this project. So I will cut out of the 20, believing that if I am caught, the man at the head will be caught.
All right, let me bring in Okutepa here. We're pressed for time, but we've hardly scratched the surface. Now, there's so many issues on Mike's wall. We talked about budget padding and all of that. Of course, there's DSS raid of justices. Now, Buratai's properties in Dubai was one of the issues that, played out in the course of the year. Recruitment of relatives, the CBN, and all of that. How would you assess the way this government in the light of its strong zero tolerance for corruption, how has it really handled this? I want you to answer to that very quickly. And then, you know, his war has been endorsed by the US, John Kerry, the World Economic Forum in Davos, the UK, and all of this. Have they really supported in this war against corruption, would you say?
Well, to assess the war by the present government, I think the war is only revolving around the president. I think the president will need to look beyond himself and bring in some Nigerians of impeccable characters and credentials to assist him in fighting corruption. And my learned friend made a very valid point there, where he said that even those who are giving contract or giving jobs to people have already corrupted the process of giving out the job. So the president must watch all the ministries, the departments, and ensure that nobody has corrupt tendencies within that department, because the followers are looking at the leadership. If the leadership's body language shows otherwise, people will still be corrupt. And I think right now we are still deeply involved in corruption. Go to the road, you see police collecting bribe. Go to everywhere, corruption is there. So we have not yet, it's not yet Uhuru. And I think that we must develop institutions, we must be patriotic, we must be committed to a Nigerian project. And we must find out how our founding fathers, the Awolowos, the Sardaunas, the Ezekiels, how did they live their life? That Nigeria was good compared to what we have now. People go into public offices for personal aggrandizement. We must check them. And politics has become a do or die because it's the only viable industry in this country. So for me, the war against corruption is not yet being fought in a manner that some of us would want it to be fought, because there are some people who ought not to be at the corridor of power, that they are there. Why?
Okay. Unfortunately,
we're trying to get the clarity from there.
You want to respond to the question of the support of the international community, whether you're talking about the US, the UK, and the World Economic Forum, who have actually endorsed this president's war against corruption?
Well, my comment as regards the endorsement of the US Secretary of State to the fight of corruption in Nigeria is that a man outside cannot appreciate the inside of your house better than you, who is inside. It is like a computer, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's what they have fed that they see, and bulk of that is what happens in the media. For you to say actually that there is support for the fight against corruption, it has to start from endorsement from within. If a man outside tells me how good my house is, and I'm happy about that, when I know within that same house myself that it is not all well, I'm living the food's paradise.
You know, in other words, the endorsement by Nigerians should be
the endorsement by
the
Nigerians
best
should be the best.
But are they giving the right support in terms of not allowing this corrupt monies to be banked in their country?
That is what that's what I'm coming to. That what has the US done? What has the European Union done about monies? We were told that there were a lot of stolen funds during the Abacha era. And what is the delay in bringing that money back? They are talking about the endorsement in one hand. And on the other hand, they are questioning, tell us what you've done with what the ones we returned before. So for me, that is hypocrisy. Endorsement has to start from back home. That's my take on it.
All right. Now, let me get the senior advocate in here. Now, at the inception of this administration, they talked about setting up special courts to try corrupt cases. Now, we know that that process is still on, but Nigerians are kind of concerned. The government is very, very ardent when it comes to, we know the stand of the president when it comes to corruption or anti-corruption, as the case may be. And these courts, we can't see the formation of these courts yet.
Sorry, I'm not getting you very well.
All right, what I'm asking is, why is it taking so long What I'm asking simply, why is it taking so long to establish the special courts that were projected by the president when he came in?
That is the point I made earlier, that if government wants to fight corruption, it must not be situated within the president alone. There are forces and there are forces that doesn't want corruption to be fought. And the president must keep an eye on it. For instance, why does it take long time for corrupt cases to be found out for people who have been specifically trained for that? Why is it even to give later? So there are a lot of things that are still going on that are not correct. And government must be up and doing if we are sincere in fighting corruption. There's still corruption, and corruption is fighting back. No doubt about that. There are some people who are not happy that corruption is being fought because that is where their economic livelihood, is dependent. So there is still corruption, and it's taking long time because the bureaucratic bottleneck is associated with corruption. Some people don't want things to be done. They want to be seen. They want to be their palm to be greased, and so on and so forth.
All right,
so something about it.
Finally,
okay.
That's why the president needs to look
deeper.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Whistle Act blow. How would it help in this war against corruption? Very briefly.
If it is allowed to operate the way it ought to be, it will help. But the problem is the public information bill we're talking about. When you send an application to a department that, for instance, this local government was allocated some amount of money, and I learned that this contract, I'll give a specific case here. Look at the Badagry Expressway being constructed by Julius Berger and ROC, this is CICC, for instance. Some portion of that road has already gone bad. A road that is yet to be commissioned, which has just been constructed not quite 4-5 years ago. If we have the Freedom of Information Bill, the national thing I should do is to make an application to the appropriate department and say, look, I need to know what the details of this will be.
Okay.
But if you send in that bill, you are dead sure you never get a response in the next 1 year.
All right, Bartholomew Agbodo, thank you very much for coming on the program today. Thank you.
Thank you so
And we
much.
thank you, Jibrin Okutepa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, for joining us on the program from Abuja. Have a great day ahead. All right, this is where we come to the end of today's edition of the program. Tomorrow, we'll be back here again to talk about other issues that concern Nigeria and Nigerians and Africans and the world. I am Mike Okwoche.
And I am Ngozi Alebu. Like I always like to do, it would be unthinkable to allow the boat of this crucial campaign promise to capsize midstream. Let's leave it there. That's according to President Muhammadu Buhari. Take care now. Let's see you tomorrow. Bye.